Hi, my name is Chris Sadler. I'm the Director of Human Resources for the Sun Prairie Area School District. And I'm going to go through the proposed handbook changes for our June 9th, 2025 school board meeting. Much of the changes that we typically do each year, as described in the situation report, we try to do on an annual basis. We review the handbooks both from an employee worker standpoint and also a departmental standpoint, always looking for ways to either clarify things that seem to be confusing or making sure that we're updated to the current environment, and that's specifically in technology, and then also making sure that if anything's changed legally or within law, that that is reflected in our handbooks. So a lot of the pieces I'm going to be describing today are more around clarifying and updating based on technology. And I'll go through those pretty quickly. One section I'll take a little bit more time with because it's larger, um, and we'll go from there. So the first handbook that we're looking at is our educator handbook, specifically for our professional educators. Both of those, one of the pieces is really around clarification around overloads. In the past, as you can see, we had just said maybe assign one instructional period or class per semester more than the typical teacher assignment outlined in our handbook. But we really wanted to define that instructional period because sometimes it varies, and we want to make sure people understand what that period is. So we specifically put that language in the blue there. One instructional period or class equates to 45 minutes per day or 90 minutes every other day to kind of just connect with our block scheduling. The second piece is more about when somebody has an excess of 215 days of PTO in their PTO bank, then we do provide professional educators with a payment at the end of each fiscal year. Before, we had it in the first regularly scheduled payroll of July, but sometimes that was really hard for business services to turn that around, especially with holiday and sometimes depending on when the pay period in July actually fell. Now that we go, once every 2 weeks. So that now has been moved to the second regularly scheduled payment in July. On to support staff, we do have language in our professional educator handbook that if a substitute staff were to be assigned in error and they attend a school, which rarely happens, then we do provide them with payment because they drove in, spent time, and then had to possibly drive home. So we just mirrored that language in support staff because that is a group that typically has substitutes come in for them if they are out of work. And then hours of work, we do have a couple roles that literally are scheduled on weekends and holidays, specifically around custodial staff. So we wanted to make sure that the concept of being paid time and a half on a holiday or a weekend, we wanted to make it sure it was clear that if your job role requires you to work on the weekend or holidays, that the handbook language doesn't apply. And then on to our all employee handbook, which obviously, as it states, is meant for all employees. One of the areas we worked with this year specifically was around updating a few pieces that are really focused on technology and electronic communication. So I'm not going to go bit by bit about what was changed. I'm going to talk about the summary of those updates. Most of the changes were really in line with what we're seeing with our artificial intelligence. We worked with legal counsel to make sure that the language was matching their opinion on how best to talk about artificial intelligence. So you'll see that we did add concepts around artificial intelligence platforms to make sure that that is consistent with the current increase in the use of artificial intelligence and technology, both from a communication standpoint specifically, but we're also seeing that in work that people do, which we'll talk about in a little bit. We also updated just some policy references to make them more specific around not just policies, but the procedures themselves. We added new, more clear user responsibility about making sure data is protected. And then obviously we updated social media platforms because that's changing all the time. And we do want people to understand, what we're talking about with social media. So this is something that typically probably would change over the years because we know that social media changes pretty quickly. So as you can see, we've added in X, which was formerly Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, just so people understand what we're talking about. Okay, just going to the next page. The other part that we're talking about specifically around, again, technology and preventing inappropriate relations with students around student relations is that we clarified age language because prior to that, we had, you know, we were talking about whether regardless of whether or not the student is 18 years old. We just made that clearer because we do have students that are over 18 years old. So we talked about adding language around or older after 18 years old to emphasize the prohibition that applies to all students, regardless of their age. Um, we updated some just generic policy language and actually added in the actual policy of GBD and GBDR from the process standpoint. And then we added Section C, which was to really make clear the mandatory reporting requirements if anybody suspects child abuse, and that it does connect to technology as well. And you can see that within that, we are talking more and more about the importance of reporting. And then the work made for hire. This language we added more language around artificial intelligence again that even if it is generated by artificial intelligence, if it's under the direction of an employee, that would be included in work made for hire um, in the case where people are using the materials that are created on while they're working for us to generate income for themselves outside of employment. So again, that work is actually owned by the district. And again, we just made it clearer around district ownership rights by adding the language that the district shall at all times retain all rights and privileges pertaining to any and all work made for hire. When we look at annual vacation in all employee handbook, we just made it a little bit clearer around the idea that yes, employees are entitled to use vacation, but that's really under the supervisor's kind of realm of approval. But we needed language where if an employee if they're a full year employee, if they resign in their first 90 work days, any vacation that has been put into their account does not get paid back to them because vacation in our language throughout our handbooks is paid out if somebody were to resign. And this just kind of gives us our concept of probationary period that if somebody resigns in their probationary period of 90 work days, they would forfeit that vacation payout. And then finally, there's required employment training that we have that is both district required and state required for mandatory reporting, bloodborne pathogens. And we want to make sure that it's clear that any of that type of training, required employment training, is just a condition of employment, but it doesn't count towards any of our groups' compensation structures around PD hours or points. So we just wanted to make that clear in our handbooks as that language was not there before. So again, as I stated in the situation report, most of this language typically is worked through our employee engagement work groups, just to make sure they're aware of it. But this year is a little different because it really just was around clarity, and then obviously updating to social media platforms and just the legal requirements that we need to be clear on, especially in the technology realm. So, last year was a better example when we moved our PTO, payouts with somebody that resigns from our district. We moved that to a stay stipend, we call it. So last year was a better example of really diving in with our employee work groups and coming up with a solution to something that people were interested in changing. So thank you, and I appreciate you listening.